a goal. Benman towards Henderson.
Before the medals, before the final he was never allowed to play, before the headlines he never got, there was a boy, small, fast, unforgivable, William Henderson, born 24th January 1944 in Lisbon, Glasgow. His father was a coalman. His mother ruled the house with silence and steel. They didn't raise him for applause. They raised him for survival. And survival never needed height. He was 5'4". They laughed. He was too small to tackle, too sharp to control. They called him Wee Willie with a smirk. But smirks disappear when you can't catch what's beating you. By 17, he had crashed through the gates of Ibrox. No waiting. No begging. He wore the badge of Rangers, not like a boy living a dream, but like a man settling a score. He didn't run, he burned, he didn't cross, he carved, he didn't ask to fit in. He bent the line around him and still they whispered, "He's selfish. He's raw. He's not one of us." They didn't understand that some players don't come from systems. They come from fire. By 18, he scored the winner for Scotland. By 19, defenders feared the wing he touched. But the praise never came loud. Not for Henderson. Not for the boy they called too fast to trust. They clapped the others. They doubted him. Subscribe if you believe some players weren't born for their time. They were born to outrun it. He didn't walk into a team. He walked into a hierarchy. Rangers in the 60s wasn't a place for lightning. It was a shrine for names already etched in stone. Jim Baxter had the swagger. John Greig had the captaincy in waiting. Henderson? He had the wing. And silence. Every run he made lit the crowd. Every match he dragged Rangers forward. But when the names were written, his wasn't first. It wasn't even second. He wasn't the joker the press adored. He wasn't the voice the cameras chased. He was just the one who kept delivering without ever being invited to the celebration. He wasn't soft, he wasn't political. And that made him inconvenient. He didn't play the charm game. He didn't flatter the veterans. He didn't wait his turn. And so, they never truly handed it to him. He made over 400 appearances, won 2 league titles, 4 Scottish Cups, 2 League Cups. He carried the rhythm of Rangers' most explosive decade, but they remembered the song, not the drummer. Inside the dressing room, you learned fast. There was a line, and even when you were faster than everyone else, you were expected to stay behind it. He didn't, and they never let him forget it. Glasgow didn't need 2 magicians, but it had them. On one wing, Willie Henderson, speed, edge, and pure technical venom. On the other, Jimmy Johnstone, all chaos and charisma, a whirlwind in Celtic green. They were near equals, same size, same hunger, same fearlessness. But the city and the system only ever crowned one. Johnstone became the young darling. Henderson became the footnote. One was called a genius even when he vanished for weeks. The other was called difficult even when he showed up and delivered. Fans loved Jinky like a hymn. They watched Henderson like a challenge. The stats said one thing. Willie Henderson earned 29 Scotland caps. Jimmy Johnstone, just 23. But the memory cheats, and the headlines lie. Johnstone's flaws became folklore. Henderson's fire became a warning. He never fought Jinky with fists, but he felt the war every time the cameras turned to the other wing. And worst of all, he knew he'd earned more consistency, more control, more moments of clarity in games that needed discipline. Not chaos, but discipline doesn't get you statues, and control doesn't sell papers. So while Jinky was being wrapped in legend, Henderson was being trimmed from it. 2 men, 2 wizards. Only one was allowed to be unforgettable. And it wasn't the one with more caps. It wasn't the one with more silence. It wasn't the one who kept showing up. It was the one the world decided to love. And Henderson learned, being better was never enough. You had to be chosen. They always said he wasn't a team player, but when it mattered, he delivered for the badge. October 1971, Lisbon, Portugal. Sporting CP versus Rangers. Second leg of the Cup Winners' Cup second round. Tied on aggregate, extra time. Chaos in the air. Henderson scored, not just a goal, the one that should have sent Rangers through. The one that broke the tie on away goals. But the referee didn't know the rule or didn't care. He ordered penalties. Both teams obeyed. Unsure, confused, boiling with fury. Rangers lost a shootout. And Henderson watched as his goal, his moment, his history was wiped from the page by a referee who didn't understand the tournament he was officiating. Back in Scotland, they waited. UEFA reviewed the match. And days later, Rangers were reinstated. Henderson had been right. The away goals rule should have counted. His goal should have ended it. But by then the damage was done. His joy had been stolen. His teammates had walked off in shame. And his name and the one that had scored in Lisbon was never remembered like it should have been. He did everything right, and still had to prove it happened. It wasn't just a rules mistake, it was a warning. Even when he played hero, someone could erase the ending. And he never forgot it, not when the club moved on, not when the press moved past it, not even when they reached the final, because Lisbon proved what the shadows had always whispered: Henderson could shine. But they could still pretend not to see it. He gave them a decade, 100 crosses, 1,000 sprints down the wing. He fought through silence, through shadows, through Lisbon, and when Rangers finally reached their greatest night, he was gone. Barcelona, 24th May 1972. Cup Winners' Cup Final. Rangers 3, Dynamo Moscow 2. The club lifted the trophy they'd chased for years. The fans flooded the Camp Nou pitch. The medals were passed around. The names were carved into history. But not his. Because just weeks before he'd fallen out with Willie Waddle, the same manager he'd stood beside in Lisbon, the same man who ignored him when he said the referee was wrong, the same figure who would lead Rangers to glory. Without him, Henderson left the club in the final stretch. No ceremony, no honour guard, no farewell, just silence. And a trophy raised by the same institution that chose to forget who helped build the road to it. He didn't get a medal. He didn't get his name in the matchday squad. He didn't even get a thank you. Missing that game, he would later say, was one of the worst moments of my career. No red card, no injury, no scandal. Just a fallout, a quiet push into exile. While the stadium roared without him, he had helped carry them there. And when they arrived, they shut the door in his face. That night, Rangers became legends, but Henderson became a shadow in someone else's story. And for the rest of his life, he would carry the weight of something he helped win, but was never allowed to hold. When Glasgow turned its back, he didn't beg to stay. He packed what the press refused to print and took it to the world. 1972, months after the final he never touched. Henderson left Rangers, not because he was finished, but because they'd already treated him like he was. He signed with Durban United in South Africa. Sunlight, altitude, new voices on the terraces. And for the first time in years, he was allowed to play without expectation dripping in sarcasm. Then came Sheffield Wednesday, England's hard ground, heavier boots and even heavier critics. But Henderson showed up. 48 league appearances. 5 goals, no medals this time, but no shadows either. Then Miami Toros, the States, the NASL, where names like Eusebio and Pelé would soon follow. Henderson went first, dribbling like he was still 22. The crowd didn't know his scars, they just saw the flash. Then, Hong Kong Rangers, Carolyn Hill. He became a captain, a teacher, a leader. He was named to the Hong Kong League, no politics, no favouritism, just football, and finally respect. Then, Brisbane Lions, Australia. He wore the badge without cameras, played matches without scripts, and still, he created. Still, he ran. Still, he gave. And then, at the very end, Air Dry Onions. 2 final league appearances in Scotland. 2 silent farewells. No fanfare, no back page spreads. Just a trail of countries that treated his name with more care than his own city ever did. He didn't vanish after Rangers, he just took the game somewhere it would speak back. And for a player who was never allowed to enjoy the applause, that was enough. He saw the game better than most, even when his eyes didn't. Willie Henderson wore contact lenses, not a trivia line, a symbol. He played with glass in his eyes and noise in his ears. The crowd shouting, the press doubting, the whispers always circling. He's too fast for his own good. He doesn't listen. He won't bend. They weren't talking about his vision. They were talking about his refusal. He didn't flatter the managers. He didn't massage egos in the dressing room. He didn't slow down for the names that couldn't keep up with him. And for that, they labelled him hard to manage. One match day, short-sighted and tired, he asked the time near the Celtic bench. Johnstone snapped, "Ask at the other dugout, you bloody fool. This is Celtic bench." The press laughed. They always laughed when it came to him, because Henderson made them uncomfortable. He wasn't violent, but he wasn't passive. He had a temper. A striker's elbows felt it. A lazy teammate heard it. He demanded the same standard he gave, and he never forgave the people who refused to give it back. He wasn't just fast. He was driven. And in a game run by soft alliances and long memories, his fire made him a target. No scandals, no arrests. But just enough bite to make people say, good player. but hard work behind the scenes. Translation? He refused to be tamed, and in a club that preferred players who smiled while bleeding, Henderson made it clear he would give everything on the pitch, but not 1 inch of himself off it. He faced hard men, he faced cold managers, he faced silence from the crowd that should have cheered louder. But nothing ever hit him like this. Her name was Michelle, his daughter, his pride, his fire off the pitch. In October 2010, she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. Not a rumour, not a newspaper lie, a sentence that shook his world. She didn't hide, she didn't run. She built something, the Michelle Henderson Cervical Cancer Trust, a fight against the same silence that took too many lives without warning. Willie stood beside her through it all, through the treatments, through the fear, through the hope. But in October 2012, on her 28th birthday, she passed away. No stadium could echo the sound of that silence. No fan chant could soften what that day took from him. He had run from defenders. He had survived being erased from football's history. But now he had to keep going with a scar no one could see, and no one could fix. Since that day, he's walked deserts for charity. He's spoken in her name. He's funded equipment and treatment rooms across Scotland. Quietly, fully. No glory. No headlines. Just a father refusing to let grief become dust. The world forgot to honour Willie Henderson when he was playing. But he made sure they would never forget Michelle. They never gave him the grand farewell. Never wrote his name in gold. Never replayed his goals the way they should have. But he's still there at Ibrox. At charity nights. At the edge of the room. Willie Henderson, now 81. Still sharp. Still fire behind the eyes. He doesn't talk much about Lisbon. Doesn't complain about Barcelona. Doesn't ask why they cheered others louder. He just remembers. Everything. He ran a hairdresser's, kept a pub, ran a hotel, buried his daughter, and still stood back up for the club. Never bitter, never begging. Just there, like he always was. He speaks when it matters. And when he does, people still listen. You never want Celtic to be above you, but it's not about noise, it's about what you build. They called others heroes, but they remember him when they talk about the games that really mattered. Ask the real fans, not the ones who read headlines, the ones who were there, behind the goal, beside the mud, watching a right-wing blur destroy defenders like it was his job. Because it was. They didn't need to sculpt him in stone. They carried him in memory. And some legends don't fade. They just wait in silence until someone tells the truth. Subscribe if you know the game forgets who it fears. But real fans never do.